Hey everyone, Shin here. So I've been trying to find a build that I would enjoy playing on my warrior in the current PvP meta at kind of the higher rankings and whatnot, because I'm not really a fan of Shoutbow. And I've actually found a variant of the HAMtastic build that I've really been enjoying and have been having a lot of fun with in ranked and unranked queues. Now, as far as the mentality behind this build, this is a glass cannon, roaming, and decapping build. You are essentially playing this build like you would play a thief, but as a warrior. And as a result, I fully acknowledge that you could replace this build with a thief on a team. I'm not claiming this is a new meta build or that I want this to be meta or anything like that. This is just a fun build that I've found that is both fun and successful when played right. Now, since it is a variant of the HAMtastic build, it uses the hammer and greatsword. It uses a lot of the same utilities you would find in the World v World version: Healing Signet, Balance Stance, Endure Pain, Bulls Charge, and Rampage. I would highly suggest not switching off of Endure Pain because you're going to need that upfront burst protection and the stun break as often as you can have it. I would suggest sticking with Rampage because, again, you're going to want to be front loading your damage and your control effects on a point when you arrive or when you arrive to a team fight and +1 it. You don't want to be caught with no major threat to a fight, no major upfront contribution to a fight if you're going to be darting in and out of those fights, or you're going to need to lay on a bunch of pressure on an opponent you're assaulting a point at. You can run War Banner if you feel like you're going to be team fighting a lot, or if you want to coordinate with your team for it to work. You can run Signet of Rage if you want high Fury uptime, but my personal favorite and the one I've had the most success with is with Rampage. So that's the one I'm going to suggest sticking with for this build. Alright, jumping into traits, the spread of this build is 42404. Before I go into the new stuff, I'll go into the stuff that is the same as World v World. The strength traits are Great Fortitude and Slashing Power for more health and more damage respectively. The defense traits are Dog March and Cleansing Ire, again for condition management. One thing I will mention about Dog March, while you can't get snare immunity in PvP because there's no food, you can still get benefit out of having Dog March because not only will it, of course, reduce the duration of the snares you do get, it will give you regeneration, which is going to be important because you are going to be very squishy and you're going to need every amount of health regen you can get your hands on. Now for the differences, jumping down into Discipline first, you have Warrior Sprint, which is the same as the World v World build. However, we're not taking Vigorous Focus with this variant. Instead, we're going to take Mobile Strikes. Mobile Strikes is what makes up for the lack of passive snare immunity you have to deal with in PvP. Immobilize is easily the most deadly of all three snares in the game, and given how squishy this build is, being able to get yourself out of those immobilizes as much as possible is incredibly important. You have Whirlwind Attack, Rush, Earthshaker, and Bull's Charge are all guaranteed ways of getting you out of immobilizes thanks to Mobile Strikes. Now, you might be wondering, since we don't have Vigorous Focus anymore, where is that extra vigor going to come from? Since this build is incredibly squishy, and you would imagine more dodges would be a very nice thing to have. That problem is solved by the trait we pick in arms now. Furious Reaction is a trait that gives you Fury and Vigor when you are hit for 10% or more of your total health. And whenever this happens, it triggers a 30-second internal cooldown. Both of these boons last for 10 seconds, and in the case of Vigor, this is actually longer than Balance Stance will provide you, and it's about the same as a traded Berserker Stance would give you. This means that, on average, you're going to have higher Vigor uptime from this trait than you would with Vigorous Focus, simply because you have a lower health pool, lower total health pool, which means that people are going to have a higher chance of hitting you for 10% or more of your total health. And you have a shorter internal cooldown on this trait than you do on any of your stances on their base cooldowns. So that means you have more dodging per minute than you would with Vigorous Focus. The other reason this trait is important is because of Fury. Now, you may be wondering why I've been emphasizing Fury a couple times so far in this video. The reason for this is because of how the amulet and rune set for this build is set up. Jumping over to the gearing, I will go over what hasn't changed. This build uses the exact same sigils as the World v World build. It uses Air and Hydromancy in your Greatsword, and it uses Doom and Impact in your Hammer. Now, as for the rune set and amulet, this is where a lot of the important things and important pieces come together. For your amulet, you're going to want to be using preferably Assassin's Amulet, But if you feel uncomfortable with giving up that much health, you can drop down and use Berserker's Amulet. Optimally, you're going to want to use Assassins because it is the highest damage output this build can achieve. Now for the rune set, this is why Fury is important. The rune set is the Rune of Rage. This rune set gives you all sorts of perks based around Fury. It gives you extra Fury duration. It gives you a chance to gain Fury when you're hit. It gives you a bunch of extra crit damage through ferocity boosts. And it gives you 5% extra damage flat while you're under the effect of Fury. This Fury comes from the rune set itself. This Fury comes from the Furious Reaction trait I talked about. And this Fury can also come from Arcing Slice on the Greatsword, which has longer Fury uptime based on how much adrenaline you have. You're going to be wanting to use Arcing Slice often anyway to manage the conditions you're going to be taking on while fighting in team fights or on points, which means going for 3-bar Arcing Slices to get rid of those 3 conditions is also going to be netting you a lot of Fury. And because of that, you're going to have a lot of plus 5% damage uptime and a lot of time to take advantage of all that extra crit damage you have. This build runs just under 220% critical damage with the Assassin Amulet and the Rune of Rage set. With the Berserker Amulet, that number drops down to roughly 205%. It is a substantial drop, but it's not enough to not warrant using Berserker's Amulet. Alright, now the gameplay for this build in Conquest is fairly straightforward. Like I've mentioned already, you're basically playing the role of a thief as a warrior. You want to be moving behind enemy lines, you want to be taking their points, decapping them, and then if you have enough time, capping them in your team's favor. You want to be moving into team fights and giving your team an advantage in numbers and proceeding to cleave through anyone who's standing in a point. You want to be using cooldowns like Rampage both offensively to shut down opponents in team fights and defensively if you need that damage reduction. It does reduce damage by 25% while running it. You want to use Rampage, your Bull's Charge, and your Greatsword to get in and out of fights and move between points as necessary. It's fairly straightforward if you're already familiar with how the high tier meta works and what thieves do. Now, luckily, right around when I was testing and finalizing this build, ArenaNet held their first open beta of the Stronghold PvP mode that's coming in Heart of Thorns, and I figured what better time than now to check out how this build works in Stronghold and see if there were any observations I could make, whether the build kind of fell apart in the mode or whether it was even better, and just kind of get a general feel for how the build worked in a non-conquest setting. Overall, the build works as well as I figured it would. It's very good for moving around the map. It's very good for clearing out the enemy guards at their gates. It's very good for moving into the enemy's offensive lane and killing any NPCs they have on the way to your gates. It's very good for running supply because you can get between the central supply area and your barracks quickly. Because of its high damage and control potential, it's very good for handling players 1v1. It's very good for protecting your door breakers and NPCs if another player happens to stroll by and try and take them out. It's very good for helping with DPSing down the Lord and the guards in the Lord room. The only drawback I found, other than the fact that it is glass cannon and you can't stay in a fight for too long, is that in Stronghold, the fact that a lot of other people are running more damage-oriented builds and they're not running as much Celestial means that you are more susceptible to getting spiked down a lot faster than at least I was expecting when it came to Conquest. Because in Conquest, a lot of people are running Celestial and you don't have to worry about too much spike damage from them unless they're, say, a Thief or a Shadow Mesmer. But in Stronghold, you have a lot more, say, Fresh Air Elementalists, you have a lot more Thieves running higher DPS backstab builds, you have a lot of builds that are just designed to kill things quickly because of the nature of the mode with NPCs and whatnot. So this was actually a mode where I jumped back and forth between using Assassin's Amulet and Berserker's Amulet. And from my perspective, it was very much what I figured it would be. The Berserker's Amulet gave me more health, so I was able to stay in fights longer, but I did lose some pretty crucial damage. So it was one of those situations where you could go either way based on preference and not be in the wrong with whichever you choose. Conquest, it kind of leads more towards the Assassin Amulet because you are aiming to take down Celestial builds more and just typically more bunkery builds. But Stronghold, you're dealing with a lot more high DPS, a lot more glass builds. So having that little extra bit of health does help take care of those builds a bit more readily. Or at least stay in the fight with them a bit more readily. As well as stay in fights like the Lord Room or maybe in a giant team fight in mid for supply. At any rate, that's it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoy this variation of the HAMtastic build. I've had a ton of fun playing it, ton of fun testing it, and I plan on using it for the foreseeable future until something major shakes up the meta. With that, I will see you around the stream or in the next video. Take care, everyone.